Hey guys, it's Ethan from Zimmer Labs, and this video is on Thomas's Rey Desert Scavenger Masterpiece Lightsaber that I just finished up for him. The hilt is a Denis Lukyanov and KR Sabers collaboration, and the finish was done by Multiverse Props. The finish is absolutely gorgeous, as you can see. Really high-end finish on this guy, and the overall build of the hilt itself is also extremely nice. This is a fun hilt because not only is it really screen accurate and well built, but it's got the mechanical top here that twist opens and twist closes, and as you can see, all these little pieces are all functional mechanical pieces that collaborate to make the whole thing work. So it's a pretty efficient and pretty impressive piece of engineering that those guys put together. And I think my favorite part and my biggest gripe with this hilt are all the little screws. I'm pretty sure that, hopefully you guys can see them, on each of these little leaves that opens up, there's 2 screws that hold them on, and then there are 2 screws that mount them to the arm, and then 2 screws that mount the arm to a piston, and then there's a ring of screws all the way around the inside that holds the top to the neck of the emitter. So there's, as you can see, there's lots of little screws, and they are all little tiny, I think metric 1.2 or 1.4s. I think they're 1.4s. Now, the only gripe I have is that for whatever reason these screws want to come out. So for those of you guys who have bought this or who are going to buy this hilt, keep that in mind. Just opening and closing it like this a few times is enough to loosen these screws, and they'll just fall out. And they're so small that if you don't see it happen, chances are you'll never find them again. Now, as far as the hilt goes, it's a 2-piece. Pommel comes off. It's a twist lock. There are 2 little tiny set screws here, and that's how it stays together. Got a belt clip right here. Sound vent holes on the bottom. Nice blade plug that illuminates really nicely, and a main set screw for the blade right here. Well, it's that simple to get the blade plug out. Now, as far as the chassis goes, Thomas sent me a full kit. And let me show you guys what it was. On the left there, these guys are the parts as I received them. He got the whole Goth 3 Designs master chassis. And all the parts were done in brass, and the kit included all the electronics and the plastic chassis. Here's the chassis as it comes as part of the kit. So it's just black plastic, and it's all one piece. You have to cut it up into pieces to assemble it. And this is what it finished as, and I am super happy with how it came out. Thomas wanted a no-holds-barred masterpiece build with all the bells and whistles and the best finish that I could give it to keep it aesthetically in line with the look of the hilt. And the hilt has got a, it's got a desert scavenger feel to it. The chassis is 1 piece, 28mm speaker on the bottom, removable 18650 battery, main power switch down here, and then on the flip side we have a cover section here that is magnetically attached with your soundboard here. Obviously this is a Profi board, just clips right on, and then as you go up there's kind of a rocket ship looking centerpiece here that I've loaded with pixels, and then a whole lot of what looks like a giant heatsink center section here with swing open doors that let you access the rotating plasma aligning mechanism right here. So these doors allow you to gain access to it, and then a nice quartz crystal spear right at the top. And then at the top we've got a stock Custom Works 5 input pogo pin connector, and this mates with another part of the chassis that's actually still inside the hilt and is permanently mounted in there. And let's see if I can show you that part. Switch assembly slash blade connector assembly. This is the piece that mounts up inside of the hilt and stays in there permanently, which is why it's a separate piece from the remainder of the chassis. So for this guy, what I wanted to do was dressing up the chassis as much as I could, and the first thing that I wanted to do was to add some different coloring and some contrast by adding some silver to the parts. So as you can see, a lot of the metal parts, which are brass, I plated with nickel in order to give it some distinction and some contrast. So rather than have the entire thing be a brass color, the center part, this part, and then all of the heat sinking fins, and then around the top section here and the top heat sinking fins are all nickel plated brass, and then the side details nickel, and the side details over here with nickel with the brass in the very center, just to give it some extra detail and character, and I think it came out nicely. Then I just applied a patina and then sanded and polished the metal parts to make them as shiny as possible. After that, what I wanted to do was to take the chassis design kind of a step further by eliminating as much of the visible plastic as I could, because it's a really beautiful chassis, but this whole top part was just black plastic. This whole bottom part, including this part, was all just black plastic. So what I did was I carved out and cut away as much of the plastic as I could and replaced it with metal. So this is just a custom aluminum insert that I turned and polished, and then an additional brass insert that I turned and then gave it some patina and some detailing and mounted over the bottom of the chassis. And then on the side, as you can see, there are some nice brass cutouts that I put over the cutout sections that are in the chassis that have some sort of faux Star Wars-esque writing in them. So I just cut that all away and then put these inserts in there. And the end result is there's almost no real visible plastic anymore, with the exception of just this little bit right here on both sides of the battery. As you can see, on the inside we've got the female end of the connector setup, which mates with this guy. The switches on the chassis are on the top, nice and hidden and worked into and incorporated into the chassis. This is one of my favorite parts of this chassis design, actually, and it's just a simple little thing, but the way it's designed, if you have these little small brass tactile switches, they fit perfectly in here, and you just end up with this little tiny brass nub sticking out. So that's all that you see, but it looks nice in, you know, the configuration and the design of the chassis. It works well along with that. The first real issue or hiccup that I ran across was there was no place for a secondary switch. So I checked out the web and found some videos of a similar build someone else did, and the chassis that they had was different. Even though it was the same Goth 3 Designs master chassis, the one they had these square cutouts on both sides rather than having this brass ring set up, and they had just kind of square buttons that you depressed on both sides for power and auxiliary. But as you can see, that's not how this chassis is set up that I got, so I wasn't sure exactly what happened. I don't know if that was an early version of the chassis or if this is an early version of the chassis, but either way there's definitely a change to the design. And as far as I can tell, there is nowhere to put a second button now on this version of it. So I just said, well, I'll just duplicate what happened on this side because it works well. So I just cut out a very small section of the top part of the chassis here and hid another tactile button right there behind this section of the chassis. And it works fine, as you can see. So we've got auxiliary here, power here. We've got a strip of neopixels for accents here, and then a second strip up in here, and the two are daisy chained to make the effect run the entire length of the bottom 2/3. So my goal was to have the auxiliary effect kind of be as much of the saber as possible. I wanted a ramping effect that just basically ran through the whole saber itself. What I'm going to do is turn the lights down a tiny bit so you guys can actually see that. It's a bit too bright in here to really... That's a little easier to see now. So we've got 2020 neopixels up here in this little rocket booster section, and then 35 pixels down here. And this was actually a chance for me to use my custom pixel strips that I had made a while back. They are much more closely spaced. Here's a strip just for you guys to compare the two. Here's a strip of standard 144 pixels per meter SK6812s, and then these are my custom strips. These are 198 pixels per meter. I had these custom made by a company overseas, and they did a terrific job on them, but unfortunately my plan was to use these for making blades. At the end of the day they just weren't any brighter, which was really disappointing, but at the same time using these for accents is fantastic because they're so densely packed that you get a much better accent lighting, accent effects out of them. If you take a close look at these guys, the distance between the pixels here is 2 millimeters, which is basically half the size of the pixel. The distance between your standard 144 pixels per strip is right around 4 millimeters. Or 3.5. So there is as much space between each pixel as the size of a pixel. So that gives you the ability to get more pixels into a small area, get more light out of it, more brightness, and better animation. When you power on, it does a ramp up effect that is similar to the heatsink effect that I like to use, but with a more yellowish tone to the overall effect to just kind of stay in character with the lightsaber being a yellow bladed saber. Up top we've got some swing open, again, magnetically closed doors, panels, which give you access to the rotating crystal phase aligner. And then we've got about a 1-inch quartz crystal point. Nice and brightly illuminated. So as far as taking the chassis out of the hilt, it's a simple matter. You just start by popping and sliding off the pommel. Then you simply wiggle back and forth a bit until you find the right angle and slide it down. When you get to the bottom, the only tricky part is you want to line these little screws on the bottom here up with the pipe channels, because there is a groove that runs down the center, and that's the groove right there, and that's intentional, I think, put here so that these can slide past these screws, because these little tiny screws stick inside of the hilt so that the pommel can lock onto them. So it's a simple matter of lining those grooves up with the screws to reinsert, and then once you got it past that part, you can just kind of push up, wiggle, and go back and forth a bit until you get to the very furthest part it will go. And that's where you've got just about 1/8 of an inch of this brass side skirt part right here visible. That's once you've got it to the part where it won't go any further up and you can feel the spring of the pogo pins, that's how you know you've got it inserted all the way and aligned correctly. And you can test it by checking to see if it'll power on. Put the blade plug back in. Set screw, as I mentioned, is on the side, and you only have to turn it about 1.5 times, or even less, depending on how loose you make it. But that's all you need to get that tight.
I'm from the Resistance. Your sister Leia sent me. We need your help.
Now let's go ahead and take the blade plug out. And we'll install the blade. We've got a 1-inch blade tube adapter here on a 7/8 inch blade. It's a nice snug fit, as you can see. You have to kind of push and twist all the way in to make sure it goes all the way down. Okay, now I just want to snug up that set screw. Turn and a half, like I said. And now let's go through the blades. The first one is going to be a nice bright yellow. Force quotes on all of them.
I'm from the Resistance. Your sister Leia sent me. We need your help.
And that's Final Steps by K. Sith for the sound font. Nice, excellent smooth swing effect on that one. Now to toggle to the next blade, the best way to do it is to hold the power on and tap the blade. Like that. Blade 2, similar but a little bit more yellow, less white in this one. And this is Light Side Attack sound font. Next one is got a tiny bit more orange to the blade and a little bit of a unstable flicker to it. And the sound font is the Light V2, another K. Sith. This is one of my absolute favorite sound fonts.
Kind of failed you. I won't.
This This is the Butcher sound font, and this is a audio flicker / color cycle yellow, white, and orange blade. This is just a standard TFA sound font, I forget which one, and it is a cross between yellow and coral in color with a slight, very slight flicker to it. This is a yellow turbine blade, which is yellow and white audio flicker. Next we've got standard blue blade.
You're too late. You lost. I found Skywalker.
Nice green blade. It's a lighter pale green. Kind of like a Kit Fisto color.
I'd rather not do this now.
Red Vader blade. Next up we've got a standard red fire blade. And I think that's it, and I think we're back to the beginning. Yep, and that's back to the beginning again. So that's the blade array, and I think we're going to cut out the graduated fire blade or modify it because it's not working as well as hoped. I think this is a gorgeous hilt, a gorgeous finish. Multiverse Props, KR Sabers, Denis, Lukyanov, kudos, hell of a job. Thomas, I hope you like it. I think it came out really nicely, and I'm very happy with it. And of course, if you have questions, let me know. If there's anything you want to modify, add, change, subtract, whatever, let me know. And thank you guys as always for watching.